West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Breaking news, the United States Supreme Court agreed to continue blocking a law that would have disenfranchised tens of thousands of Arizonans. Welcome back to Democracy Docket. I'm Mark Elias.
Mark, the U.S. Supreme Court just issued a major decision in an Arizona election law case. In a 5-4 decision, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that Arizona can require some voters to provide documentary proof of citizenship to register to vote. However, the court kept other suppressive parts of the law blocked. Mark, what does this mean?
You know, Arizona Republicans have been enacting these various voter suppression laws for years and years. And one of the iterations of this was a law, HB 2492. And today, the U.S. Supreme Court agreed that the main portions of that law remain blocked for 2024.
Mark, what's key to understand in this case is that Arizona has a bifurcated voter registration system. Now, in every state, you have a state-level voter registration form, and then there's also a nationwide federal voter registration form. For many years, Arizona has required that when you register to vote using the state form, you need to provide what's called documentary proof of citizenship. Basically, you have to prove that you're a U.S. citizen in order to vote. If you register to vote using the state form or the federal form and you provide proof of citizenship with your voter registration form, you're registered to vote and you are good to go. If you don't provide that proof of citizenship, but a county recorder is able to verify your citizenship using the Arizona Department of Transportation records, their version of the DMV, you're fully registered to vote and you can vote for all races. If there's not documentary proof of citizenship and the county recorder can't get that information from the Department of Transportation, it creates a bucket of what's known as federal-only voters. These are voters who have attested that they are a U.S. citizen under the penalty of perjury, but they haven't provided that documentary proof, but they're still able to vote only in federal elections, so for Congress, Senate, and President. But in 2022, Arizona Republicans passed a new law, HB 2492. One provision of the law says that if you register using the state form, but don't provide documentary proof of citizenship, your registration will be rejected, even if officials can verify your citizenship in other state databases like the Department of Transportation. This provision was previously blocked by the courts, but SCOTUS said today that it can go into effect.
So, Paige, you said something that I think people really need to understand, which is that Arizona already has this bifurcated system. And the reason they have this bifurcated system, as you allude to, is because they have been trying to figure out a theory to disenfranchise voters on sort of these grounds for the better part of a decade or more. The fact is, Arizona Republicans, even before the era of Donald Trump, even before the big lie and election denialism, Arizona Republicans were finding out creative ways to disenfranchise voters. We talked on earlier episodes a long time ago, Paige, you and I, about the Brnovich decision, right? And this was yet another sort of scheme they came up with, right? Where they vilified Latino voters to pass a law that the Department of Justice had refused to pre-clear, right? This was a law that when pre-clearance of the Voting Rights Act was in place, would have violated federal law. And then after the Voting Rights Act, Section 5 was struck down, they passed an even stronger version of this law, which prohibits essentially the collection and return of mail-in ballots. And they did it because they thought it would disenfranchise Latino voters and Native American voters. And so, people need to understand the backdrop of this, which is that this is not Arizona Republicans trying to give good government. This is Arizona Republicans who have been on a more than a decade-long crusade to try to make it harder for an increasingly diverse group of American citizens, make it harder for those folks to vote.
And Mark, that's just further proven by these provisions of HB 2492 that were challenged. I want to talk about the other two provisions of HB 2492 that remain blocked because they would have immediately disenfranchised thousands of voters. So because these provisions remain blocked, but the documentary proof of citizenship requirement for registration went into effect, we're calling the SCOTUS ruling a mixed bag. So number one, it wants to ban federal-only voters from voting by mail in federal elections. Now, what you need to understand is that Arizona voters love to vote by mail. It's something like what, Mark? Over 80% of Arizona.
Yeah, it's 80 plus. It could be higher this time.
Right. Arizona loves to vote by mail. So if you ban federal-only voters from voting by mail, you're most likely taking away the primary method that these people cast their ballots. Now, number two, the law wants to ban federal-only voters from voting for president, not for Senate or for Congress, but only for president. And that's marked strange. I would say weird, even. There's no reason to single out the presidential race as the race to ban federal-only voters from, unless you're really worried about your status as a potential swing state. And these bans for federal-only voters on voting by mail and voting for president apply to both new and existing federal-only voters. Now, over 30,000 Arizonans currently fall into this bucket of federal-only voters. So we're talking about potential clear margins of victory in a race.
And Paige, that's why this ruling, as sort of mixed as it is so important. Because, look, would I have loved to have won everything here? Yes. But it is important that the Supreme Court at least found that key portions of this law were not okay and should remain blocked, at least for 2024. That's not the ideal, but it is an important sign that the Republicans in Arizona have to stop trying to rig these elections.
Mark, with today's Supreme Court ruling, where do we go from here?
So look, this case is going to go forward. The fact that we won today and dodged a bullet in the Supreme Court, we have seen the Republicans are quite relentless when it comes to their voter suppression tactics. So, what we won today was the denial of an emergency stay. So essentially, the Republicans don't get to upset the status quo while the case continues.
Mark, it's fights like these that impact outcomes of elections. Like we said, Arizona has a very recent history of incredibly close elections that have swayed not only the direction of the state, but the direction of the country.
Yeah, look, President Biden beat Donald Trump by fewer than 11,000 votes in 2020. It was a safe margin, but it was only 11,000 votes. Governor Hobbs beat Carrie Lake. Carrie Lake is a complete lunatic, right? She's running for Senate now, and hopefully will lose by a bigger margin. But Katie Hobbs beat Carrie Lake only by 18,000 votes in 2022. If you look at some of the other races that in 2022, like the AG's race, it was even tighter. Of course, it's not just the presidential race, right? It's not just the Senate races. It's these congressional races. It's these other down ballot races. Control of the House of Representatives is right now given depending on the given day, it's like 3-seat margin or 5-seat margin. Well, imagine if you had had another black opportunity district in Alabama and Louisiana, another state that that should have been in place for 2022. Imagine if we had fair districts in place in Florida, another state where litigation is ongoing, or in Georgia, right? These things could affect the control of Congress. So when we talk about this margin in Arizona, yes, it's the presidential election. It's also a U.S. Senate race. It's also congressional races. And when you multiply out the Arizonas, this case got a lot of attention because it's for the U.S. Supreme Court. But how many cases, Paige, have you and I talked about around the country, in Nevada, in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, in Montana, in Ohio, right? These fights are taking place all over the place. New York, we did a video recently about a huge victory that Democrats had and Republicans suffered in New York that can have impacts for Congress. In state after state, the story is the same, which is that Republicans don't want voters to be able to vote. They don't want their ballots to be able to count because they know that is one of the keys for them to maintain power, political power, when in fact they don't enjoy majority support among the electorate.
It is Friday, the 23rd of August of 2024, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, our little Yorkie, is the door girl. And, of course, as you know, she is sleeping in just a tad. So we will be seating you directly for our especially special daily special Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life, indeed. I chuckled there because every now and then I amuse myself with vintage words like a tad. Who uses language like that anymore? Well, we do. Because we are of a certain age now, aren't we? Oh my gosh. Hey, a little update on Precious. She is sleeping in. Nothing untoward, I don't think. I took the time. Oh, apologies for the late start. We had, of course, we were broadcasting the Democratic National Convention this last week, live streaming it. And I guess that brings in a lot of data that I suppose I should have got rid of and then rebooted, and I have not rebooted. So I was forced to do that this morning, and I thought I decided to take the time that we would normally start the show at and use that time to take care of little Precious and some things that I would have normally taken care of before the show. And that way I wouldn't be rushed. She took her medicine like a champ, and she didn't want to be up on the sofa anymore. I thought that maybe she wanted to be up on my bed while I was getting ready to do the show, but no, she decided to climb down off it and go do her own thing. And it looks like she's just taking a little nap, so I'll let her take a little nap. We may go for a drive later on. We'll see. So, she seems to be doing fine. Still, I always worry. There's one thing that I've noticed, and this has been at least for the duration of her illness, is that when she's sleeping, sometimes she has like little convulsions. And it looks like, I don't know, it's not a dream. How, dogs will, any of us will move our feet like we're running or something. It's not like that. A little worrisome. I don't want her to be in agony or pain. That's basically what it gets down to. So she seems to be doing fine. During the day, she's wagging her tail. We'll see how she is later on. They always want me. Of course, Gunner is not alone in all this because he has to have some attention too. But he understands. In fact, he's such a good dog. Before, he would kind of bark at her if she came and wanted to take a kibble out of his dish. Because, how dogs are. But now that he knows that she's, sick, he he kind of just like watches her do it. Because it's only a kibble or two. But he's such a good boy. He's a good big brother, as we say. Is it correct to personify our animals as such? Humanize them with traits, humanize them with human traits? I suppose it's not a good idea, but I don't care. I used to, but now I don't. Anyway, wasn't that a great closing night at the DNC? Oh my, I thought it was fabulous. And were we rickrolled about the secret performer? Secret special performer? Maybe. Or maybe it was Leon Panetta after all. People were saying, who had Leon Panetta on your bingo card? And I was thinking, well, maybe he's the special guest. I actually thought some people joked about that, and it could be that that's indeed who the special guest was. Could be. So we'll see all sorts of right-wing musings about that. They're going to call it a coup. It was a coup that kept Beyonce or Taylor Swift or whoever it was supposed to be. And I got to tell you, I don't think it was supposed to be anybody. The special guest of the evening is Madam Vice President accepting the nomination of her party to run for president of these United States. That is who the special guest is, everybody. All right. Or maybe she was just trying to keep the uncommitted delegates at bay. You have to give us a speaking slot up on that stage, and we won't take no for an answer. They took no for an answer. Look, the same actors who sabotaged Madam VP earlier when she shook hands in a reception line, and I believe it's Rashida Tlaib's sister and her husband, who wanted a sit down to speak about being part of the festivities. And, of course, you're in a reception line shaking hands, and she passed them off to her aides. And in the setting up of the meeting that they were going to have, they decided to disrupt Madam VP while she was speaking. Sabotage me once, shame on you. Sabotage me twice, I'm not even going to let you get to twice, okay? Look, this is how politics works. In the midst of negotiations, to have a sit down so that they could speak about, I don't know, their demands. What are their demands? I think she spelled out very clearly, though with diplomatic nuance and subtlety. After all, she is, for all intents and purposes, almost the President of the United States of America. And just because you happen to be someone before or after that designation has been bestowed, you still have some responsibilities. Just because we've had to put up with Trump and his idea of, I don't know, on-the-moment decision-making, Jesus. Some people have responsibilities and they know what they're doing and how much they can actually divulge. But regardless, she laid out very clearly how she's going to deal with Bibi. Notice how these actors don't go and protest Trump, making Logan Act violation negotiations with Bibi to keep the killing, the genocide on. Give me a break. What is this all about? It's AstroTurf, and we knew it was AstroTurf from the day they began, because that was almost the day after October 7th, when they started talking about, oh, it's a genocide. And I'm like, what are you talking about? There was a massacre, and we're still reeling from it. The world as being we. There's already excuses. You gave the the family of some hostages time. Yeah, well, what? We got to give free time to the people who abducted them? Give me a break. Apologists for that? That's going to get up on stage? I don't think so. So, yeah, no is not an answer. Well, you know what? Yeah, no is all you're getting. Anyway, that's how the cookie crumbles. And, these are not constituents that necessarily would be voting for the Democratic Party anyway. Let's be clear. Everybody whining that Joe was a doddering old fool. This is all I got. For months and months and months, the beginning of the year is, a debate of Joe. Why is he still running? And then Joe does the patriotic thing and steps aside, and all of a sudden there's this enthusiasm that was, well, we weren't expecting it either, were we? No, I don't think so. Gladly taken, but it certainly shocked MAGA. It's a coup. They performed a coup. Well, yeah, you know what? You tried to kill your vice president, so I'm thinking that maybe you think everybody acts like you. Nobody acted like you. Well, not so overtly. Let's be clear. Even during the Civil War, the Southerners didn't come and ransack the White House and the Capitol building and smear their poop on the walls. The first time a rebel flag was brought into the Capitol building was on January 6th. And now this guy ostensibly is going to have like a gala to fet these insurrectionists being some sort of, heroes. The rise of the Old South, is that what that's supposed to hearken? Jeez. Do I sound like an old guy at the end of the bar? Hey, I will never be an old guy at the end of the bar. I sit in the middle of the bar because I like, to sort of like turn back and forth. Sitting at the end of the bar, all you have to do is sit there and pontificate. You really have to know when to turn from one side to the other to make whatever it is that you're ranting about effective. Yeah, effective. Anyway, I rant a lot these days, and I've decided, why the hell not? We've had to put up with his Trumpian rants for so long. We're all tired of it, aren't we? Yep. I like the idea of joy. I like the idea of, we rock and roll, and we'll rock and roll right up into a MAGA Nazi space, and tell them, hey, deal. I don't think they can. They certainly couldn't deal with Obama. And now we have Kamala. Will they be able to pronounce her name properly? No, they won't. They'll purposely butcher it. They're already doing all sorts of pornographic permutations on it. Sickos. Okay. We're still hearing a little bit about the right-wing MAGA land being upset because fathers love their sons and sons love their fathers and families love each other because apparently in MAGA land, everybody's fucked up. It's a microcosm. Family is a microcosm of society as a whole, and we experience it in our own family. Our MAGA baby brother is, I don't know, it's like they dropped him in. If he didn't look like all of us, and ancestrally, like people in our family, extended family, you would think he just got dropped in from outer space. Everything is absolutely at odds to everything we were raised with and what we were expected to do. By the time I got to my brother, I guess everybody got tired. He was a handful. I got to tell you, both my younger sister and my baby brother were handfuls. So it's the idea of public service. Well, let's put it this way. My brother never knocked on a door to, for walking precincts for the Democratic Party. It wasn't his deal. I'm not doing it. He did get motorcycles and ride them off the roof of the high school to show off a few times. During class time. This is after, you have to understand, I'm 5 years older than my baby MAGA brother. So I'm off to college, trying to play football and, excel in my classes and whatnot. So I really wasn't paying attention to what my, juvenile delinquent baby brother was doing. And when I found out, I actually tried to have a talk with him, and he was so recalcitrant. I went, I don't have time with this, Because after all, he's still living at home. But he was a handful. They tried everything with him. And essentially, he told them no was not an answer, and so they bent over backwards. They, mom and dad, bent over backwards to try to accommodate all of his whims and all of his whatevers, to the point that when he got kicked out of school, even the continuation school wouldn't have him, so they had to find some sort of alternative educational system that would keep him out of jail. Okay. So we all worried about him. All of us worried. But he got everything he wanted. Get a motorcycle, down payment on a house. Well, it was, I gotta say, it's never ending. But if you hear from him, he had the worst childhood in the history of all childhoods. His upbringing was so disastrously abusive, and I'm like, you were never spanked. Tried to have a stern talk with you, and you broke windows and broke a door down, and I'm like, what is he talking about? Okay, so I'm sorry I'm giving a little bit of dish. I'm just saying that when I look around MAGA people, there's something, I don't know, messed up. The world to them is just a shithole. And you look around and you're like, you're in the freaking lap of luxury with parents who are trying to accommodate everything, and you're whining about a permissive society? No shit, Sherlock. You're an example of it. Some of us can live in a permissive society, apparently, because we accept responsibilities as human beings to each other, and others are incapable of it because they have no capabilities of caring about another person except for lip service. I care for someone as long as I get something out of it. That's essentially what it breaks down to. Okay? They think everything is done because somebody's getting something out of it. Well, yeah, I guess. Where one goes, we all go. Let me finish up real quick about Peggy Noonan. She's out there saying that we stole their patriotism. We stole their being Americans. What the hell are you talking about, biatch? Man. Of course, whenever she pontificates in such a fashion, I always have to get to social media and do my standard stock Peggy Noonan joke, and that is that she always lets the gin and Teutonic do the talking. The gin and Teutonic. I had to get that out. Yes. So, I think it was just yesterday where I mentioned that they, meaning MAGA, appropriated the United States flag, our stars and stripes, and turned it into an American swastika. So all we're doing is taking it back and turning it back into the stars and stripes as the founders originally intended, and Peggy Noonan says we're stealing from them. This is how it works, okay? The crime warlord comes in, takes all your possessions, And then when you wrest control of your possessions back from them, you're the thief. Thanks, Peggy. Just so we know where your, goose-stepping allegiances lie. Where's it lay? What do we have in store for you here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy on this delayed Blue Moon Spirits Fridays? Well, starting off here, well, of course, at the top, the Supreme Court fortunately rejected part of that voter suppression law in Arizona, but we'll see how that plays out. When Democracy Docket is on it, we know that something good will happen because they're on it. What do we have here on the Bistro Cafe? Well, Google agreed to pay millions of dollars for California news, but journalists call it a bad deal. A New York nonprofit has come to an agreement with several southern states to cancel the medical debt of 193,000 needy patients. And Floridians balk at the DeSantis administration plan to build golf courses at state parks. After the break, we move to the chef's table where right-wing darling Andrew Tate has been placed under house arrest as new human trafficking allegations emerge involving minors. And security at a NATO air base in Western Germany has been raised because of intelligence information pointing to a, quote, potential threat. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. We will, of course, be tucking into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. It's out of the Associated Press by Tran Nguyen. Google will soon give California millions of dollars to help pay for local journalism jobs in a first-in-the-nation deal, but journalists and other media industry experts are calling it a disappointing agreement that mostly benefits the tech giant. The agreement, which was hashed out behind closed doors and announced this week, will direct tens of millions of public and private dollars to keep local news organizations afloat. Critics say it's a textbook political example by tech giants to avoid a fee under which could have been a groundbreaking legislation. California lawmakers agreed to kill a bill requiring tech to support news outlets they profit from in exchange for Google's financial commitment. But shelving the bill, the state effectively gave up on an avenue that could have required Google and social media platforms to make ongoing payments to publishers for linking news content, said Victor Picard, professor of media policy and political economy at the University of Pennsylvania. California also left behind a much bigger amount of funding that could have been secured under the legislation, he said. Well, that's because Kamala Harris is not AG anymore. Google said the deal will help both journalism and the artificial intelligence sector in California. Apparently, artificial intelligence is people too, my friends. The public-private partnership builds on our long history of working with journalism and the local news ecosystem in our home state, while developing a national center for excellence in AI policy. Kent Walker, President Nerd of Global Affairs and Chief Legal Nerd Officer for Google's parent company Nerd Alphabet. State governments across the U.S. have been working to help boost struggling news organizations. The U.S. newspaper industry has been in a long decline, with traditional business models collapsing and advertising revenues drying up in the digital era. Well, that's because we don't have deep pocket individuals like the Hearst running the show anymore. Now we have deep pocket tech people. How is it different? As news organizations move from primarily print to mostly digital, they have increasingly relied on Google and Facebook to distribute its content. While publishers saw their advertising revenues nosedive significantly in the last few decades, Google's search engine has become the hub of a digital advertisement empire that generates more than $200 billion annually. Now let me see if I understand this correctly. Google has made money essentially after culling all this free content from newspapers. Newspapers rely on Google to distribute their content. You would think that some sort of financial agreement could be achieved. Well, the Los Angeles Times was losing up to $40 million a year, the newspaper owner said, in justifying a layoff of more than 100 people earlier this year. Yeah, but that guy's like a vulture capitalist. They love kicking people out. More than 2,500 newspapers have closed since 2005. And about 200 counties across the U.S. do not have any local news outlets, according to a report from Northwestern University's Medill School of Journalism. Associated Press staff bring us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, a New Orleans-based system of hospitals and clinics serving Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama, is working with a New York nonprofit to wipe out $366 million in medical debt for about 193,000 needy patients. The Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate, reported on Wednesday that the deal involving Osner Health was arranged by Undo Medical Debt, a donor-funded organization that negotiates with hospitals, doctors' offices, and ambulance services to purchase and erase the outstanding medical debt of those least able to afford it. Osner is the largest health system in Louisiana and has 46 hospitals and 370 clinics and urgent cares in the 3 states it serves. Osner is proud to have worked with Undo Medical Debt to enable the organization to acquire and cancel past one-time debts for eligible residents, the company said in a statement. The deal followed a Monday announcement of an agreement between Osner, Undo Medical Debt, and New Orleans to wipe out more than $59 million in medical debt for about 66,000 residents or patients in that city. The city had agreed last year to provide Undo Medical Debt with $1.3 million in federal money from the 2021 American Rescue Plan Act, a pandemic program to acquire qualifying debt and erase it. Martin at the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. The golf course is not a threatened species in the Sunshine State, but the Florida scrub jay is, and advocates are warning that life for the small blue and gray birds and many other imperiled species could get much harder if Ron DeSantis' administration follows through on a proposal to build golf courses, pickleball courts, and 350-room hotels at state parks from Miami to the Panhandle. State parks are the last strongholds for a lot of wildlife in rapidly urbanizing communities in Florida, said Julie Rathmel, executive director of Audubon, Florida. They have an outsized importance not just to wildlife, but also as places where Floridians and visitors can continue to see what Florida was like, she said. It is the best of Florida. DeSantis has enjoyed rock-solid support from the Republicans who dominate state politics. It has been rare for DeSantis to get pushback on anything from GOP lawmakers, and he has a reputation for seeking vengeance when they do, but it appears a political line in the sand is being drawn after DeSantis' administration announced plans this week to carve out golf courses and pickleball courts in Florida's beloved state parks. Unlike the issues of abortion, LGBTQ rights, race, and guns that have divided voters, state parks apparently hold a place in the hearts of Floridians regardless of party. The state park system has received national recognition for years, and people are resistant to change the protected lands they enjoy. Well, Ron, it's about time you woke up. Let us now get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You were listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, Border Crossing. I know I wouldn't want the challenge of turning Borderlands, the super popular video game, into a, you hope, hit Hollywood movie. Holy smokes. First, there's just adapting the beast. You want the movie to feel like the game, right? But you can't directly translate an immersive, interactive, open-world, characters defined by their skill sets first-person shooter, whose selling points are its atmosphere and its game mechanics as a creative kill fest, into a passively watched, linearly plotted movie with characters that are narratively interesting at the least. Gearbox released the game in 2009. In 2012, they started talking about the movie, and after that, it was 5 or 6 years before they got a script treatment that they liked. That's all before they could even start writing it. Then you need a director, and here's Eli Roth, whose most recent movie was Thanksgiving, and he says that horror has that kind of anarchic punk rock quality that translates. Plus, his horror has a bit of comedy, like The Game. He's thinking John Carpenter's Escape from New York and the visual vibrancy of The Fifth Element, so people are like, okay, he could work. But now you need stars. You want the movie to be big, like franchise creation big, so you need ridiculous level stars who can pull in the people who don't care about the game. Fortunately, Roth worked with Cate Blanchett in The House with a Clock in Its Walls, and it turns out Blanchett likes doing different things. Not every movie for her has to be Tar. Also turns out one of her favorite films? Escape from New York. Time for a rewatch. Kevin Hart wants to break out of comedy typecasting and prove he can do action. Ariana Greenblatt is on a roll. She's looking to feed her momentum. Florian Muntenu's probably just happy for the work. Gina Gershon gets to play a Southern Mae West. Who says no to that? Jack Black was also in House with a Clock, and Jamie Lee Curtis, well, she's Jamie Lee Curtis. She ain't got nothing to prove. So there's your cast. And here's Borderlands. And it helps me to know all the things people needed it to be so I can say, yeah, I see why it kind of is what it is. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
we're the Goo Goo Dolls. We're fortunate that our daughters have what they need to grow and learn. But that isn't the case for nearly 13 million kids in the U.S. that struggle with hunger.
Childhood hunger is a heartbreaking reality that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and provides it to families and children in need.
You can help kids in need in your community by visiting feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
You're listening to the American Democracy Minute, keeping your government by and for the people. New York's highest court upheld 2 lower court rulings August 20th, giving New Yorkers the opportunity to routinely vote early by mail without an excuse. The decision rebuffed state and national GOP leaders who sued to overturn it. Governor Kathy Hochul signed the New York Early Mail Voting Act in 2023, a law, not a constitutional amendment. It allows any eligible voter to apply for an early mail ballot with no excuse, subject to approval by the local board of elections. Like any absentee ballot, it must be returned or postmarked by Election Day. New York Congresswoman Elise Stefanik and state and national Republicans sued, arguing that the Early Mail Voting Act was unconstitutional because the state constitution specified in-person voting only. They also argued that a constitutional amendment ballot initiative authorizing no-excuse absentee was rejected by voters in 2021. A 7-justice panel reviewed decisions from 2 lower courts and found that since the mid-1960s, the legislature had implemented absentee accommodations without a constitutional amendment and agreed that the legislature had the authority to enact the law. 1 justice dissented. Earlier this year, the New York Board of Elections opened an online portal for citizens to apply for an early mail ballot no later than 10 days prior to the election. New Yorkers, we've linked to the portal at AmericanDemocracyMinute.org. I'm Brian Beal.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1912. That was the day the U.S. Congress approved the formation of the Commission on Industrial Relations. In the early 1900s, the terrible work conditions and entrenched resistance to union organizing had led to increased labor unrest. In 1910, 2 union members in San Francisco bombed the Los Angeles Times building, killing 20 people. The public outcry led officials in Washington to decide they needed to get serious about investigating the reasons behind the mounting anger of working people. The commission included 9 members, 3 workers, 3 employers, and 3 community members. The leader was Frank P. Walsh, a labor lawyer from Missouri. Led by Walsh, from 1913 to 1915, the commission embarked on a sweeping investigation of the conditions of work in the United States. They conducted 740 interviews that took them 154 days to complete. Interviewees included IWW leader Big Bill Haywood, labor hellraiser Mother Jones, and champion of working people lawyer Clarence Darrow. The commission investigated the Paterson, New Jersey silk mill strike and multiple other work actions. For 3 days, the commission grilled John D. Rockefeller on the Ludlow Massacre. The result was an 11-volume compilation of testimony. 100,000 copies of a shorter final report were published. The final report described the poor working conditions at many job sites and the brutal repression of the labor movement. It critiqued the treatment of agricultural workers. Predictably, many found fault with the commission's findings. The New York Herald called the commission's chairman Walsh a Mother Jones in trousers. Despite these critics, the comprehensive report stood as a powerful, detailed review of the conditions faced by thousands of working people every day. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all-night hawks in the Diner of Life. We always begin, whether from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 55 degrees Fahrenheit, mostly cloudy conditions, much cooler today than yesterday. We're only going to be in the mid-60s. We were in the mid-70s, a little bit warmer than that yesterday. Might be a little bit warmer than the mid-60s, we'll see. We'll continue having cloudy skies with periods of rain throughout the day, bringing with it about a quarter to a half inch of rain possible. Locally heavy rainfall is possible, and then a steady rain this evening with showers continuing overnight. Winds light and variable, and it looks like rainfall will be over a half an inch to possibly 3/4 of an inch. Once again, locally heavy rainfall is possible, and then intervals of clouds and sunshine tomorrow, Saturday, with a slight chance of a rain shower or two. Barely measurable, it says, and we'll have highs in the mid to upper 70s, winds out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, and then steadily increasing temperatures Sunday and through the week. We'll track that as it occurs. Grass pollen is rated low here in Rogue River. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 18 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is high at level 7. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 29.88 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles. And relative humidity is at 76%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that is the Weather Underground. London is 71 degrees and partly cloudy. Looks like Paris is 78 and cloudy with a wind advisory. Rome is 91 and sunny with a heat advisory. Kabul is 72 and clear. Hong Kong is 90 degrees and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 83 and mostly cloudy. Auckland, New Zealand is 56 and mostly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 63 and cloudy. Chicago, Illinois is 76 degrees and fair. And New York, New York is 78 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. And Nikolay Dumitrash at the World Desk of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. A court in Romania's capital yesterday, Thursday, placed the divisive internet influencer Andrew Tate under house arrest for 30 days. As prosecutors investigate a sprawling new case that involves allegations of human trafficking of minors and sex with a minor. The Bucharest Tribunal's decision comes a day after prosecutors detained 6 people, including Tate, age 37, and his brother Tristan, age 36, after masked police raided 4 homes in Bucharest in nearby Ilov County. Prosecutors had asked the court to remand the brothers in custody for 30 days. Tristan has been placed under judicial control, which typically involves geographical restrictions and reporting periodically to the police. The brothers' spokesperson responded to the decision by saying the judge denied the prosecutor's request due to the brothers' exemplary behavior while previously under preventative arrest measures in a separate case, and that they firmly deny all the allegations against them and remain steadfast in proving their innocence. The Tate brothers, former kickboxers and dual British U.S. citizens, are already awaiting trial in Romania in a separate human trafficking case, along with 2 Romanian women. Romanian prosecutors formally indicted all 4 last year. In the new case, Romania's anti-organized crime agency said it was investigating allegations of human trafficking, including trafficking of minors, sex with a minor, forming an organized criminal group, money laundering, and influencing statements. The crimes date between 2014 and 2024. Staff at the World Desk of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Security at a NATO air base in western Germany has been raised because of intelligence information pointing to a potential threat, and all staff not essential to missions have been sent home as a precaution, NATO said. The Geilenkirchen air base near the border with the Netherlands is where the Alliance's Airborne Warning and Control System, or AWACS, aircraft are based. A post on the NATO AWACS Fleet's account on social media network Twitter, never X, late Thursday night last night, announcing that we raised the security level but did not elaborate on the nature of the potential threat. It said that, quote, operations continue as planned, end quote. The base said Friday it had nothing to add to the statement, and the situation at the moment is unchanged. German news agency DPA said a reporter saw police cars on the grounds of the Air Force Base. Police confirmed deployment Thursday night, but gave no details and offered no information this morning. Last week, a major German Air Force base near Cologne was locked down, as reported here, for several hours amid fears that its water supply had been tampered with. An investigation found no evidence of such sabotage. There were also reports of suspicious observations at Geilenkirchen, and a person was briefly detained for questioning near the base, DPA reported at the time, but there turned out to be nothing untoward. And the incidents come at a time of jitters about the possible vulnerability of infrastructure to attempted Russian sabotage. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week. But you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here on Monday for River City Hash Mondays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day, all night, and all weekend for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here on Monday, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.